Zimbabwe just announced a $1.2 billion foreign exchange reserve boom that has the Western financial world scrambling to understand how this once written-off nation is defying every economic prediction. This isn't just about one country's recovery, this is about Africa rewriting the global economic playbook. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has just declared that Zimbabwe is on a firm recovery path, anchored by what he calls a stable macroeconomic environment. But here's what the mainstream media won't tell you. This announcement comes at a time when major Western economies are struggling with inflation, recession fears, and currency instability. While England battles economic uncertainty and India faces its own challenges, Zimbabwe is quietly building financial strength that could reshape Southern Africa's economic landscape. Let's break down exactly what this means, why it matters for every African nation, and how this fits into the broader story of Africa's economic renaissance that the West desperately wants to ignore. To understand the magnitude of this announcement, we need to go back to where Zimbabwe was just a few years ago. This is a country that experienced hyperinflation so severe that people were carrying wheelbarrows full of cash to buy bread. The Zimbabwean dollar became worthless, and the country was forced to adopt foreign currencies just to function. But here's what the Western narrative always gets wrong: they paint this as purely internal mismanagement without acknowledging the role of international sanctions, colonial economic structures, and deliberate sabotage by former colonial powers who couldn't accept Zimbabwe's land reform policies. The $1.2 billion forex reserve didn't happen overnight. This represents years of strategic policy decisions, including currency reforms, mining sector improvements, and most importantly learning to trade with partners who respect Zimbabwe's sovereignty. China, Russia, and other BRICS nations have played crucial roles in this recovery. Like this video to help more Africans see this story that Western media is downplaying. Mnangagwa's announcement reveals several key indicators that prove Zimbabwe's economic turnaround is real and sustainable. The foreign exchange reserves have grown from virtually nothing to $1.2 billion. Agricultural output has increased significantly, with tobacco and gold exports driving much of this growth. But let's talk about what this really means. Zimbabwe is demonstrating that African nations can recover from economic warfare without begging the IMF or World Bank for loans that come with sovereignty-destroying conditions. The mining sector alone has contributed over 60% of Zimbabwe's export earnings. Gold production has reached record levels, and the country is exploring lithium deposits that could make it a key player in the global green energy transition. While the West talks about green energy, Zimbabwe is positioning itself to supply the critical minerals that make it possible. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, this is about economic independence that every African nation should study and replicate. President Mnangagwa has been the driving force behind these reforms, but he's not working alone. Finance Minister Mnangagwa has implemented policies that prioritize local production and reduce import dependency. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe under John Mnangagwa has managed currency stabilization that many experts said was impossible. But the real heroes of this story are the Zimbabwean people themselves: farmers, miners, entrepreneurs who never gave up despite years of international isolation and economic pressure. The international community's response has been telling. Traditional Western partners who imposed sanctions are now quietly exploring ways to re-engage, while Zimbabwe's relationships with China, Russia, and regional partners have strengthened. The country's participation in SADC and its growing ties with other African nations show a clear shift towards South-South cooperation. Subscribe for honest, Pan-African analysis you won't find on CNN or BBC. Zimbabwe's recovery isn't happening in isolation, it's part of a broader African economic renaissance that Western media refuses to acknowledge. When one African nation demonstrates that recovery is possible without Western approval, it sends shockwaves across the continent. Look at what's happening across Africa. Nigeria's tech sector is booming, Ghana is becoming a regional financial hub, Rwanda has transformed into a modern service economy, and now Zimbabwe is proving that even the most challenged economies can turn around with the right policies and partnerships. This $1.2 billion milestone is just the beginning. Zimbabwe's strategic position, natural resources, and educated population position it to become a major economic player in Southern Africa. The country's experience with economic adversity has also built resilience that could be crucial as global economic uncertainty increases. For the rest of Africa, Zimbabwe's example proves that economic sovereignty is possible, that nations don't have to choose between development and independence. This could inspire policy changes across the continent that prioritize African solutions to African challenges. The implications extend far beyond economics. When African nations demonstrate successful recovery and growth, it changes the global balance of power. Zimbabwe's success contributes to a multipolar world where Africa has real choices about its economic partners and development path. This is exactly why stories like this matter, because they show that Africa's future is being written by Africans, not by former colonial powers or international institutions that have never had Africa's best interest at heart. Zimbabwe's $1.2 billion foreign exchange reserve announcement represents more than economic recovery. It represents hope for every African nation that genuine independence and prosperity are possible. As President Mnangagwa continues to build on this foundation, Zimbabwe could become a model for African-led development that the rest of the continent can study and adapt. The question isn't whether Africa is rising, the question is whether the rest of the world is ready for what that means. Check out this next video where we explore how other African nations are implementing similar economic strategies that could reshape the global economy. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Which African country do you think will be the next to shock the world with its economic transformation?